We're discussing the Rambam and the Ravad had a few machlokasim over there. Machlokasim is Yiddish for disputes about who gets to purify for Korbon Pesach and who doesn't. We saw it also they had a major argument about that sugya there. Understanding the sugya, which is trying to understand the biblical passage about the men who are disqualified from offering Korbon Pesach with Am Yisrael the year after the Exodus. Okay, so reference the video that dropped today, as we were discussing last week. The there were some people who couldn't offer Korbon Pesach that day. To what extent were they impure? Rambam said they actually went through the entire ceremony with paradum and everything to purify themselves. We went to mikvah, but because they'd done it that day, the chiddush was they're not qualified to make Korbon Pesach. And the Ravad says if they had done everything that day, they would have been qualified to eat at night, so they were included in Korbon Pesach. The whole problem with these men was that they didn't do the ritual before the Pesach had been slaughtered. So they didn't get, grandfathered in. Okay, so let's see the other issue over here. Rambam continues. This is the Rambam in 6.6, Korbon Pesach 6.6. The Rambam saying that what happened here was he had a fellow who was supposed to purify already a day before Erev Pesach. He finished his paradum account. Day 7 for him was day 13 of Nisan, except it's also Shabbos now. So they're not going to sprinkle with the edge of the paraduma today because it's Shabbos. It's a gezerah d'Rabbanan to sprinkle someone. It's prohibited by the rabbis to have the sprinkling done on day 7 if it's Shabbos, right? So what's going to happen? They'll tell him, wait until tomorrow for your day 8, which will be the 14th of Nisan. It'll be Erev Pesach on Sunday. Get sprinkled tomorrow. So they will be able to do so, but because he got sprinkled today and completed his ritual today, just like one who actually completed his day 7 on the 14th of Nisan and got sprinkled that day and everything in the morning, still is unqualified for Korbon Pesach, this fellow is unqualified for Korbon Pesach. That's a big surprise in the Rambam. The Ravad disagrees with this on 2 points. Ravad says, one, why you can't push off the sprinkling one day. The sprinkling always has to be on day 7. Day 7 is the 5th day from day 3. 4 days later. You can't say, well, day 7 came and went, I ain't sprinkled the Asher Paraduma, so we'll just do it tomorrow. That doesn't work. The day 8 is already beyond the count. Yes, you should start your sprinkling not on a Sunday. And you should start your count not on Sunday. Since it's Takana d'Rabbanan, according to the way the Rambam has it, at least according to the way the Ravad has it, you shouldn't start your count on a Sunday. And we'll see the Nafkamina also in Avodas Yom HaKippurim. When would they start quarantining the Kohen Gadol? Because the Kohen Gadol is to be purified, Yisafek, the days leading up to Yom Kippur. But the 3rd day and the 7th day, but they have a way of counting it. So we'll see. It's actually kind of machlokas there. Once, so look, let's say you were at the funeral. You buried a guy a month ago. You can start your count whatever you want. Okay? And that's what people used to do. Unless they're Kohanim and they really need to start counting now. So then they start counting, as soon as they can.
So if you had a paraduma tomorrow and you say, okay, this is the first day.
You can't, well, today, Friday would be your first day. It's after sundown already.
Yeah. You get the idea.
Yes.
So I have to start from the first day, not automatically.
Yeah.
Third day.
Yeah. You have to count. Every time you have a purification, you have to count specifically. Okay? Also, women who are treating themselves as zavot. For the Hilchos Nido, we saw that the way they understand it is a woman has to have a hefsek tara. Hefsek tara means today, Thursday just ended. She had to treat Thursday like day 0. Day 0 is essentially now like today is the day I'm making sure no longer have anything that's menstrual, such that Friday could be day 1 of the count. Okay, and she has to make a check on day 1. Barest minimum is she has to check on day 1 and day 7. So there's complete 7 days. Yeah, so do they have to say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu L'Olam Asher Kishon V'Mitzvos V'Tzivanu Lispor or Al Sfiras Hatara or Al Sfiras Hazivus or something like that? No, there's no such thing. Okay, why not? Because it's a good question. Retire. Is there a bracha for when the mitzorah or when the zav or when the tmei mace go through their purification? Do they have al hatara, al spiras hatara or something like that? We haven't seen it. You have a thing beer chametz. You make a bracha. You say, sorry, I shouldn't use the Yiddishism. You recite the blessing upon beer chametz when you start checking for chametz. Now, 12 hours before you're going to burn the chametz, right? Yeah, it's a good thing. So why do we count for Sfiras Omer? Because Sfiras Omer, the actual mitzvah is count these days. Yeah, count these days. Every individual has to do it from the beginning of the day. Yeah, so it's a good question. Why did Chazal do it? Chazal could very well have established that these counts have a bracha to them. Chazal are the ones who created the Birchos Mitzvah, right? Yeah. So in this case, there is no. I haven't seen a bracha. Maybe someone can enlighten me. There's a lot of stuff I haven't learned yet, but. Yes, there are. But usually they do have a bracha.
Yeah, I'm saying there's a bracha. If one says it.
Yeah, there's no. People ask a classic Brisker question: why is there no mitzvah of putting the stuff in the bracha on putting the coins in the pushka? Pushka is a kupat stuff. It's Yiddish. Okay, so why is there no bracha? Good. So you heard it. So you know there's a lot of things like why is there no bracha specifically for this? And why is there no bracha al kriyat shema? Remember we talked about this 2 years ago. Who can answer the question? Someone's listening. Yes, because actually established 2 brachas before, 1 or 2 brachas afterwards. Saying surrounded by brachas, like there's no bracha al kriyas Torah. It's Asher Bachar Banu. Okay, there you go. Let's see here. So the Rambam continues. V'alo Yisur Shavot. It's an Isur Shavot. Isur Aslayah b'Shabbat Mishum Shavot. Well, what am I doing here? The Rambam basically said this fellow can't get sprinkled on the 13th of Nisan because it's Shabbos. So we'll sprinkle him on the 14th of Nisan, Sunday. But because we're doing the sprinkling on Sunday, he's now disqualified from Korbon Pesach. And this is an Isur Shavot. The fact that we didn't sprinkle him on Shabbos when we should have was a takana de Rabbanan, lest someone come to violate Shabbos somehow. And this is causing him to violate an Isur Kares, missing Korbon Pesach. Well, not I say Kares. Well, Pesach the Kares. If he misses out on Pesach, he gets Kares. So you're telling him to observe the biblical. You're telling him to observe the rabbinic enactment against sprinkling the ash of paraduma, which will result in him missing Korbon Pesach, which is kind of worse. You know, we are learning about that. That's what the Rambam is discussing right now. Yeah, it's in the Mishnah too. You should be learning Pesachim. Everybody should be learning Pesachim now. So what's the answer? Why would the sages establish their words in the place of kares, which means when we're dealing with someone perhaps potentially being hit with a liability for kares, why would the sages make an institution that prevents him from doing what he should be doing? Good question, right? That's the Rambam's question. It's because the day they have the rabbinic enactment of Shavuot, don't sprinkle him, is not the day he's obligated to bring a Korbon. Yeah, it's the 13th. The 13th is Shabbos. It's also day 7 of his count. So today the sages say he can't go sprinkling. Yes, tomorrow there will be consequences, but tomorrow is tomorrow. Today he has to observe the rabbinic decree. That's the way the Rambam understands it. You'll see there's going to be also a contradiction, at least the way the Ravid understands, some difficulty in the Rambam. Therefore, they kept what they said in its place. Even though this will cause tomorrow, like Lasi Lavo, the Rambam gave an example, I think, in the shir last week. The rabbi said this. Lasi Lavo doesn't necessarily mean distant future or messianic times. Sometimes it means tomorrow. And this is an example where the Rambam meant Lasi Lavo means tomorrow, literally. Okay? Lamod b'makom karei. So he established it. And then the Rambam is going to give another example, which is going to make the Ravid have a few major kashas on it. If you want, you could have actually take my one that has the Ravid in it, so you can actually see it. You also get to see my notes. So there you go. Wow. If you could read my pencil, my scribbles with pencil, Yeah, I wrote that. I also color coded it. Good. Whenever you have a heter or a leaning to the wing, it's in green, and a prohibition of some chumrah is in red. See, and you can flip through, especially in the earlier pages there. There's a lot more red and green. Shows you also distinctions. I rewrote some halachas based on what the Ravid's kasha would be, the way the Ravid wants it to be. Yeah, these things are too complicated to do, but there's some, a few pages of this. The best way to learn Gemara, I find, is to make everything a schematic or color coded. That's why you need your own, Gemaras, so you could, draw on them. I learned that. You know who else was color coding their Gemaras? I found they weren't. Although I disagree with them, they're using highlighters. Highlighters are worse because they stain the page and stuff, and they're not erasable. I use colored pencils. Yes, I've improved on it. Rabbi Dulitz used to use his Gemaras with full of colors and underlying things, and also Rabbi Avi Gemaras. You've seen them. They have. He's like Rabbi Dulitz. They have a lot of colored and highlighting there, but I don't like that, so I use colored pencils. So yeah, that's the hardest part because the rabbis don't have faces and voices. It's much easier to remember nowadays. Things that Rabbi Breitowitz says. I learned this funny anecdote. My father was listening to Jonathan Pollard's video a few weeks ago. I caught him listening to it. Yeah, bomb Iran and stuff, and said, I'm on the same channel. Do you ever listen to my videos? He says, I listen to Pollard all the time. Like, yeah, but do you listen to my videos? Like, yeah, yours sometimes. And my mother was more blunt. She listens to Rabbi Breitowitz, not me. Okay, fine. Well, I guess I deserve it because Pesach time is when I went to go learn the halachas. I realized, okay, you're learning some kashrus. Oh, really? Here's any kasher things. You don't really need to do this and that. Here's what the Shulchan Aruch says, and here's a Pri Megadim. And then we took a test on it in in yeshiva, and then we're learning Pesach and all that, the actual halachas. And my mother learned from Rabbi Blumenkrantz. Not that she was not only getting a copy of his book every year before Passover, if you know the Blumenkrantz book, he was her teacher in high school. So to tell my mother you don't have to coat everything with aluminum foil around the kitchen, that was already made me into a heretic. So yeah, there you go. Okay, so what does it say? Yisrael Arel Shemal Be'erev Pesach Shilchatin Alav Achar Shemal. Let's say you had a Jewish fellow who was an Arel for whatever reason, whether intentional or not. There are a lot of this actually happened a lot with the fall of the Iron Curtain. Question came in. Hold on a second. Falls after Shabbos. I don't know. Make sure you're all ready for Passover before Shabbos begins. Leave over some bread to have your first and second meal, but not your third meal. And throw whatever chametz is left from the morning meal before the zman. Don't forget bittul chametz and throw it in the garbage at the dumpster, and you're done. Don't throw it in the toilet; it'll clog your toilet. So that's what's going to happen with that. And don't do any more preparations. You can't prepare for your meal or cook food on Shabbos for Passover. In the old days also, if there was Korban Pesach, only when Shabbos was over. So get ready everything before Shabbos. And if you can, try to get to Jerusalem before Shabbos also. So you can be there for Korban Pesach. You can't travel on Shabbos to Korban Pesach on Shabbos. Okay, so be ready. Pesach is on Shabbos, so what's the problem? If you're offering if the first day of Passover is Shabbos, it just means finish roasting your Korban Pesach on Friday afternoon before Shabbos comes in. Okay, so yet an oral. This was a case that happened quite often, 30 years ago and more, when all the Jews were finally able to get out from behind the Iron Curtain. All right. So what happened? A lot of them were Aralim, so they want to come back to the fold, so they have to get circumcised. So a Jew had been uncircumcised until then, and he had his circumcision on Passover, on Erev Pesach, the 14th of Nisan. So Shochatin alav achar shemal. Once he has properly circumcised himself, he underwent the circumcision at 9 o'clock in the morning. We can slaughter the Korban Pesach on his behalf. He can be part of the group, right? We don't have to wait, for example, to say maybe he has to heal first, which would be a good idea, by the way. But still, to qualify to eat Korban Pesach, he could still he could do it the day of his circumcision. But if you had a convert who converted on the 14th of Nisan, that's when he had his circumcision and his dunk in the mikveh. Ein shochatin alav. He cannot participate in Korban Pesach. You say, congratulations, here's your Jew certificate. I guess we give him a yarmulke and tzitzis. 9 o'clock in the morning. Good job. Which, by the way, is one of the hardest tests. Avraham Avinu's hardest test until the Akedah was what? Circumcision. At least that's what Yishmael thought. He boasted according to the Medrash. Everything I could do, you could do better between Yitzchak and Yishmael. Yitzchak pointed out, I submitted to circumcision. You didn't. So it's like, if God would say, submit to be a Korbon, I would do that. So God said, okay, you're on. Now, Avraham Avinu, he submitted to this, and every time you have a ger, nowadays, if you had a ger who was somehow circumcised, all he has to do is hatapas tam bris. Maybe he's still giving up his family, and he's engaging in something that could be of a tremendous personal loss. So gerim are, quite commendable. They're on a higher level than you and me in many respects. But also the fact that they would submit to circumcision. For us, it's easy. They did it to us when we were babies, so we had no say in the matter. If you had to be approached right now, submit to circumcision, would you say yes? Now, no, it's like, ugh. Okay? So the fact that someone has chosen to do such a thing of his own volition is highly commendable. And it deserves our admiration. But this ger cannot participate in Korban Pesach today. Sheino ochil la'erev. He cannot eat the Korban Pesach at night. Why not? Varehu kiforesh min kever. He's like someone who just left the grave. It's memes. Foresh min kever, you could say it means he just finished burying someone, or he just came back to life. He just popped out of his grave, like a tchiyas hamesim type of thing. Okay? Shetzarich shivat yamim v'achar kach yivhar. This ger, who underwent immersion and circumcision today, the 14th of Nisan, is as if he was contaminated with the dead, and now he needs another 7 days to purify himself. Why? We're afraid, there's an enactment against, let's say the ger would become contaminated through contact with the dead next year on the 14th of Nisan. And then what he's going to do, he's going to go to the mikvah and think that he could participate in Korban Pesach that night. He'll bury someone on the morning of the 14th of Nisan. He thinks it's sufficient just to go to the mikvah and be ready for Korban Pesach that night, assuming everybody's bringing the tumah, bringing the Torah. The Yomar, and he'll think, Eshtakad kachasu li Yisrael. Last year the Jews did the same for me. I immersed on the 14th of Nisan and ate Korban Pesach that night. Kishamalti tavalti v'achalti la'erev. I got circumcised, I went to the mikvah, and I ate Korban Pesach that night. That's what I did last year when I converted. So too this year, even though I was at a funeral in the morning of the 14th of Nisan, I'll just go to get immersed. Won't need to circumcise again. A little bit hard to do that. And then I'll eat Korban Pesach that night. So to prevent the ger from thinking that he could just immerse and participate in Korban Pesach, we tell him, no, you can't participate in Korban Pesach this year if your conversion was the 14th. Well, you think it sounds like a stretch? You know who else thinks it's a stretch? The Ravid. Well, the Ravid does. It starts on the previous page. There's Ravid, see? Okay, so let's see what the Ravid says. There's two Ravids. Yeah. Ad enu zman Korbon. This is the first. The Rambam, the Ravid is going to connect these two things. Okay, these two halachos. Remember, the Ravid doesn't have to be like Rashi and insert his words every few words of the Rambam. He can give you a more global picture. Omer Avraham. Ze'al mifaresh shapirish tam lahazayah v'arel. See, he says the Rambam just gave two interesting descriptions of the case involving a person whose his sprinkling was pushed off. That's the hazayah. You have it with an aleph or with a yud. Yeah, I think it should be with the yud, but this edition has it with an aleph. Hold on 1 second. You keep getting more things. You have hazayah. Oh, okay, that's a legitimate thing. So also, what's the word? Hodaya or Hoda'ah? With an aleph or with a yud? Well, the shorish, I think of the shorish in the Hodot as being a silent yud at the end. I tend to like Hodaya more, but we'll accept Hoda'ah. So if I could, I would make a rule. Hodaya is the word for Thanksgiving, and Hoda'ah is the word for admission or confession. Okay, with an olive. And that works because, they also levadeh and levadot, vidui. They treat vidui like it's a yud in the shoresh, but levadeh, to certify, is with an olive. You have a few examples of this, and I'm opening up now. Sefer Daniel. You look at these examples over here. What does it say here? Throughout, there's a lot of ksiv. Is it ilaya or ila'ah? Ksiv ilaya, kri ila'ah, for example, or madaya or mada'ah. Okay? So this is something that got corrupted with the influence of Aramaic. So you have like many examples just in the margins here. Is it a yud or an olive? Pronounce it with a yud or an olive. These are Aramaic like words. And we saw last year is the shoresh kufresh yud or kufresh olive. You had examples of interchangeability there, even though kufresh aleph is supposed to be like calling, and kufresh yud is happenstance, or pei lamed aleph and pei lamed hey. Same thing going on there. Yeah, exactly. So is it hazayah or hoza'ah? Haza'ah or hazayah? I prefer hazayah. Okay, in these cases, make a nice distinction. The shorish is a Zion, silent yud or silent hey. We're getting lots of messages. Come in. Okay, we'll deal with that later. And an oral. Lama amidu devram b'makom kares. Lo amad ta'amobo. The Rambam's reason doesn't really stand up here. Doesn't stand up for him. Ki yom arba'asar who's man shchila pesach uzrikato. The 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 14th of Nisan is the time of the slaughtering of Pesach and sprinkling its blood on the altar. Ve'hem le'ona shakaret atzmo. The really mitbo b'yomo mabekach. Okay, so if the oral were to dunk on that day, what'd be the problem? The Lama Nimnao told me, why should we stop the oral from eating Korban Pesach that day? Because of what he might say next year when he's actually today mace? The Ode, the Beis Amri, Afilu Ariel Shamal, Shisha Yamin, Korban Pesach Kaminon, Shaloipo, Matzrichin, Oto Azaya, Shishi, Ushvi, Verner Pamir Makeh, Imloviza, Nishana Vetaval, Viza, Lo Yochal. He points out also, Beis Hill are the ones who said that if what he actually he did this 6 days before Passover. Okay. Now, by the way, it's a little bit kind of funny. He's pointing out here. There used to be person was circumcised, and then they would have him dunk, right? After he had already healed. The way the Rambam has it, it's like he dunks in the mikvah right after his circumcision. A lot of mikvahs wouldn't even allow such a thing. Nowadays, what they do, the convert circumcises himself and then heals. He's not bleeding anymore, and then he goes to the mikvah. That completes the conversion. Right? It's not done on the same day. Okay. So he says here, the Od Varav Mitzvah Lama Lo Amidu Divrayam V'Areu Bazayah. I have another question then. What about the Mitzorah? According to Allah, the Mitzorah could get sprinkled on his day 7, right? Sorry, his day 7, right? And he completes his purification in time for Korban Pesach. Why don't we say the Mitzorah completed his purification on Erev Pesach is also disqualified from Korban Pesach, right? Yeah, Mitzorah. Avatam lechulan. Basically the Ravad's asking over here. The Rambam called this a shavot. Okay, the Rambam says it's a shavot that you shouldn't get sprinkled on Shabbos. The Ravad has a totally different spin. He says here, Shechol lavo lidei isur karet, bo amidu divrei b'makom karet. Okay, really, the reason for them establishing that they shouldn't get sprinkled on the 7th day, which is Shabbos, is because there's another isur kares. You can't let them get sprinkled. There's an isur kares. By kares, this is a kares and that's a kares. Bino arel akum k'moshe amru zera shem yitlam shana b'achulei. Okay, the arel is technically a guy until he gets circumcised, right? So that's the one thing. That's one thing. So he shouldn't he's not supposed to be participating in Korban Pesach. Well, he's a Jew. So the reason they didn't say is not because the Rambam like the whole thing. Oh, we don't want to get sprinkled today. Sorry, go to the mikveh today and get circumcised today on Erev Pesach, lest he think next year that he could do such a thing if he got Tmei Mace. It's because he was a guy all along on Erev Pesach. Okay, that's what he's saying here. Yeah, yeah. You're not supposed to let people who are foreigners, and let's say a Meshumad, an Arel, Meshumad, and a Goy, which are all technically different categories, are not to be included in Korban Pesach.
So when does he become not?
When does he become today? But today he was, you know.
But now he's not.
Yeah, I know it's a little bit difficult. Yeah, Arel Akum. Maybe do you have the word Akum there in your thing? Maybe I'm using what it says Akum. Yeah, yeah. Zera Shem Yitma Mesa Shalaba. Cool. Vazah Nami Shelo Yitlena Biyado. Okay? The reason they didn't say they didn't allow Hazah is not the way the Rambam says it. Exactly. It's that Hazah was prohibited on Shabbos, lest one come to carry it for Amos and Rosh Hashanah. What is the penalty for violating Shabbos? It's skila. It's a type of kares. So Isser kares versus Isser kares. They weren't going to allow Hazah no matter what on Shabbos. Why? It's not just Divreihem, it's the Shavot. Okay? It's a risk of kares. So Chazal are not going to just say, oh, put aside this potential Isser kares for another Isser kares tomorrow. Havara b'shus rabin. Not everybody has mei paraduma. You have to go to a specific place to get sprinkled or bring it to him. The Chain Ismail. And so too, the thing with the guy is he has to convert. Today he was a guy. Tomorrow, in order to do the circumcision, we have to bring a knife, a scalpel, right? So we don't necessarily want to circumcise people like him on Shabbos. Do we circumcise babies on Shabbos? Does not. But if it wasn't after the 8th day, we would not do a circumcision on Shabbos for a number of reasons, right? So we don't do conversion circumcisions on Shabbos. Why? Lest you carry the scalpel for Amos and Rosh Hashanah, or from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah, whatever it means. The Odin of Esa Pras Shenida Shemitzor Honod Ein Kan Gzera Lefichach Lo Hamidu. The other cases, the Onain we saw last week, the Onain can participate in Pesach under certain conditions, and so too the person who walked the base of pras. So he's only contaminated the suffix. He's a suffix nemes, and the mitzora to get the blood and the oil put on his bohanot, his thumbs, right? Ein kan gezerah lefichach lo hemidu. There's no gezer against that, so the Chazal didn't need to say anything that these people shouldn't participate in Korban Pesach when they purify. So they put a nafkamina there. You can actually see it over here. Let me read this. According to the way they understand the Ravid, he actually has a. Actually, I'll read this to after this. The next Ravid. The Ravid says here that there's a little bit of a problem. I made this in bold in the Rambam. One Gezerah, the Rambam says, applies to Erev Pesach, Erev Pesach. The other one to actual Erev Pesach. That's over here. The person who gets sprinkled, he doesn't get sprinkled on Shabbos, even though it's. Why did the Chazal win? Because tomorrow is the day of Korban Pesach. Their Gezerah wins if it's Erev Pesach. But then regarding this fellow who converted, the Rambam says their Chazal's Gezerah wins even on actual Erev Pesach itself.
Okay. So if there was someone who was in this,
Yeah,
they just chooses not to become Shahid.
yeah,
So they get Shahid.
he does.
So
Yes, he does.
then why?
Well, hold on, I'm saying he's amazing, but he gets a chance. He gets a chance to do Korban Pesach Sheni. The person's
So
amazing.
he does get pushed up.
Yeah.
Even if it's
Yes. We saw it last year. There's a chart. Mizidim are also pushed off the Pesach Sheni. The thing is that if you're here, actually, if you flip the page over here, you see this over here. Good review. See, if a person is mazid on Pesach Rishon, hazid, so he has Pesach Sheni. But if he misses Pesach Sheni for whatever reason, then he'll get hit with the currents. Yeah, because he's mazid on the first one. And the nafkamina over here is that Tame and Rachok, okay, are a type of shogig or nanas, right? So the person who's regular shogig or nanas, and shogig or nanas again the second time around, so they're putter two shkadas, two anusim. If he's Tame and Derech Rechoka, and he misses Pesach Sheni for whatever reason, even if he's nazid, he's still putter. But if it's a Stama Shogig or Nanas, here's the Chiddush of the Rambam, and there's some three-way machlokas, Rashi and Ravid. If he's Shogig and Nanas, the first time around it's not Tami or Rachel, and then he's mazing the second time around, so we get hit with the colors. Okay? So look over the chart. It's a pretty difficult. Rashi's a little bit machmir, Ravid's a little bit more lenient. But over here, the Ravid says that the Rambam's contradicting himself. Omer Avram Kansuter Masha Kasav Lamala. When the Rambam said this ger has a gezerah against you on the 14th of Nisan, because today's the day of the Korbon, but the Kana Chazal wins. Sheosek Lichan Yom Yudalad Zman Korbon. He calls here day 14 of Nisan, the Korbon day. Lafi Derav Hayel Lamarkan Leil Tu Shu Zman Achilato. The Rambam wanted to be consistent. He should have said no. It's the 15th. It's time for eating. Okay. He's not qualified to eat it the zman of the when he's supposed to be participating, zman of eating. Okay, so there's a little bit there's something a little bit funny going on here. So well, if he can't eat it, he's disqualified from eating it. That's why he can't bring it. But if he was eligible to eat it eventually, he should have brought it.
So if somebody
brought
the Korbon but didn't eat it,
yes, yeah, it's a little bit funny. Let me read you what they wrote here. Das Rashi Tosfos Ravid. Tememei Shechal Shvi Shalom Yoker Pesach Bizav Tzval Shochatinala. We saw that last week. Okay, if you had a person, according to other Rishonim, here's another one. Ein Archiket Hazara Yom Hashvi Me'Hazara Yom Hashlishi. That was what we saw last week. Fine, cool with that. The Fishit Das Tosfos Ravid. Yesh Latei Tam Acher Madua Ein Hazara Dochef HaShabbat Dochaf HaShabbat. Why doesn't Hazaya override Shabbos? According to them, we just saw. What is it? They just said you could have it Tmemes actually complete his ritual of purification on the 14th of Nisan, and then the BLT Krom Pesach, right? That's what they hold. So, what's it? Katav Ravad Basagadokan Shasiva Shein Dochinet Isur Shavot Shalzah Yishaf Takanach Harim Zo Noadal Archigad Adam Yisur Korein Acher Yisur Chil Shabbos. Okay. So the Ravid says, technically speaking, I would allow him to get sprinkled on this day. There's no takana. Well, it's the 14th, so don't let it get sprinkled. Sorry, it's Shabbos. Don't let it get sprinkled even if it's the 14th. The Ravid would say, well, that itself is an Isser Karis. The sages basically, how do they decide what Isser Karis is worse? Potential Isser Karis. The Kohanim aren't always the ones who are doing the sprinkling. Not necessarily to sprinkle, no. Kohanim were in charge of it. The Kohanim are in charge of, for processing the paraduma. I don't think you need a Kohen to do sprinkling. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. I checked it up. What? No, they eventually kept paraduma ashes in other places. Look in the Mishnah. The Mishnah has it that over the course of history, it started doing paraduma more and more often, preparing more and more ashes. Why?
So why would they?
It's because Jews are more fun.
Kaf shofar is important enough. When it comes to Yerushalayim, or you can do that in Shabbos.
That's a bastin. Bastin, there's a reason.
Why did it make a sakana?
Because not everybody can do that. It's necessary to purify yourself a lot of times on the way there. Purification is done all over the place. It wasn't just bastin. Yeah, everybody.
No, a specific case where 14th fell on Shabbat.
Yes.
So why couldn't they say, "Oh, come to take the sun"?
Yes. I don't know because I guess that's up to everybody. And tell people you have an exception, so it's a hard one. But now you're, like you said, you're invoking the din of the Kohen Gadol. Okay. So here, Balamor. A second. Here. Let's say here. So it says here about the Kohen Gadol. Look, even here, even the base didn't have that. B'shivas yomim elu mazinu lav me'efer apara. Remember, they separate the Kohen from his wife, Beso Zolishto. So Kohen Gadol, they don't want him to have any chance of Tumas Keri. So he's going to be quarantined in the base of Mikdash a week before Yom Kippur. So every one of those days, they sprinkle with the ash of the paraduma water. The paraduma, yeah, I said it right. They sprinkle them every day. But not every day. No, they count every day, but they sprinkle them on day 3. Vashlishi laf rashatov, vashlishu erev Yom Kippurim, day 3, and day 7, which is erev Yom Kippur. Okay, so they're sprinkling them basically on day 9 of Tishrei, and other day of Tishrei, day 5. Okay, and 5 Tishrei, they're sprinkling him. Okay, Shema nitla b'meis lo yada, lest he's already been contaminated with the mace and he doesn't know about it. V'im chal yom haShabbos b'shlishu b'shlishu. Remember, Yom Kippur has already been decided. When they established the calendar, what day was Rosh Hashanah, that was day 1 of Tishrei. So Yom Kippur will be whatever day of the week it is. But they're going to take the Kohen Gadol into quarantine starting on day 4. Right? So it's a little bit funny. If his day 3 or day 7 is Shabbos, because Yom Kippur falls out, Dochina Nazayah. So we're going to push off the sprinkling because we don't want to sprinkle him on Shabbos. That's how much Chazal felt we can't sprinkle on Shabbos. And here we're talking about the Beis Din, the Sanhedrin in the Beis Hamikdash. That's how strong this takana was. Okay? Although it's impossible nowadays for the 7th day of his sprinkling, of the Kohen Gadol sprinkling, to be Shabbos. We have a calendar that's designed that Yom Kippur cannot be mostly Shabbos. So day 7 of sprinkling will not be a Shabbos nowadays. Okay? Yeah. Kind of funny. Yeah. Okay, here's the last thing here. The Pesach is arriving. Hasiba shemidu chachamim devreim milkom zeh he shegam kan alu avra l'serkaris. Sher chashash hu shelo yitaher mitumas abeis b'fnei Pesach haba. Achias kosher b'tumas aguf on shekaris. Okay, they're afraid he's not going to purify himself next year also. Okay, before the next Pesach, and eating kosher b'tumas aguf is an iser karis. Okay, interesting, you know. So, why do we bring this up? The Ravid challenging the Rambam's understanding. Well, like we say every single time, we are going to see what will the Sanhedrin rule. This is a nafkamina every single year. Unfortunately, you could ask the Chevra Kadisha people in Jerusalem. They bury people basically every single day of the year, and they do funerals erev Pesach, and they do funerals 6 days before Pesach and a week before Pesach. And there are people, I'm sure, unless you have some clever Kaddish people who are really into this, sometimes there are. They want to do a funeral every single day. But sometimes they're planning in advance. There'll be a clever Kaddish guy who says, you know what, I have a wedding coming up. Maybe I'll take a few days off or something like that. Or maybe you have some members of the clever Kaddish who actually want to say, we're not going to put ourselves out there to just bury Mason a week before the Regalim because we want to be able to participate in the Regalim. In the old days, by the way, the Chazal recognized the Chevra Kadisha. Was there such a thing in Mishnaic times or Talmudic times? So who buried the dead? Yes, it's the relatives. Okay, of course, there's Meis Mitzvah. It started in Europe, basically. People became squeamish about it. So they have a Chevra Kadisha. But in the olden days, the main people who were responsible, if it was 3 days before Yontif, you could understand why people would say, yes, I will go to Hespedim, that's Kvod HaMeis, and I'll do Halvayat HaMeis, walking behind, and all that. But I don't want to actually, bury a mace or have to do a tara or anything like that because I want to be able to participate in the chab, which is a legitimate concern. But who has to do it then? Why does the Torah obligate this? It says the relative has to participate, even the Kohanim. So if a older Kohen dies, so his sons, he has 4 able-bodied sons, they are the ones who are obligated to not just contaminate themselves. Why are they contaminating themselves? So they can take care of him and bite the bullet for everybody else. So that all the other cousin Kohanim don't Chas v'Shalom have to do it. Or that other Jews don't miss out on whatever it is they're doing. V'nachinami, if you're the only one who's capable of taking care of the burial, then it's a very good mitzvah. So yeah, but I'll miss Korbon Pesach. You know, can you imagine? Wonder what would I do? I don't talking to someone. Would I go out of Eretz Yisrael for Pesach if I could? I had an offer to go. So I paid me $20,000 to be in Florida for this coming Passover. Would I do such a thing? So I can't do something because I make me Mr. Hypocrite. All right. I'm telling people, get ready for Korban Pesach, and then I'll leave the country 3 days before Passover. Can't do such a thing, right? So you have someone who's excited. They're actually due to imagine. We pray that there should be major improvements. Imagine if on Wednesday the Beis Hamikdash they begin building it, and the Mizbeach is up and running on Thursday, a week from today. So everybody's going to be ready for Korban Pesach. But yeah, you're going to have a mace mitzvah. Someone's going to have to do it. Would you miss out on the first Korban Pesach in 2 millennia in order to take care of a mace? How many people would volunteer to do such a thing? Yeah, so there'd be a few, but I would try not to. If someone else could do it, but if there's no one else, yeah, that'd be funny. I'd miss out on the first Korban Pesach. But family, so the family have the responsibility to do it. Yeah, but the problem is it'll probably the Pesach in such a situation we brought Batuma. When Pesach is brought Batuma, what happens? There's no Pesach Sheni. Yeah, the majority have to do the Pesach Rishon B'Tara just to have a Pesach Sheni. Okay, so also I'd like to point out here what they wrote in the name of the Ravid. We don't necessarily, I just read the word con here. We don't necessarily know what the Ravid would write in halachas. He's just giving Rambam a hard time. The Ravid didn't write a code over here. The Ravid's writing Shakvataria and Kashas, but not like most of the time. The Ravid's not writing. I believe the halacha should be X, Y, and Z. A lot of times he does. He says what the halacha should be. But in a lot of cases, it's not so clear. The Ravid's bringing up Kashas, but the Ravid didn't write a code to tell us what he really believes the halacha should be. He just says the Rambam has some contradictions, or I disagree with the logic. So we have yet to see. The jury is still out on this. To say that, once again, it might be easy just to go with the Rambam, but then again, that's not what Sanhedrin is supposed to do. Sanhedrin is supposed to say. Next halacha. This is the next parak. The seventh parak, beginning of the seventh parak. Rabim Sheyut Meimei Pesach Rishon. If the majority were contaminated with contact with the dead on the first Pesach, okay? Sorry, not the majority, it means many people. The seventh parak, you skip. By turning the page. You go from the sixth parak to the seventh parak by turning the page. Because I'm more interested in this right now. You look at those halachas also, those are even less. If what I said now is pretty esoteric and not relevant to many people, because when was the last time we actually had these machlokas in as a matter of practice? And if we get Korban Pesach going, it'd probably be Batuma anyway, so this is not a question. So maybe I should talk about something more relevant. Right? So there's more relevant halachas. Yeah. I know, for those following these shirim, sometimes I pick perhaps halachas. Someone told me, this isn't relevant halacha, it's not Shulchan Aruch. There was a guy who told me that 2 nights ago. I was trying to tell him why he needs, Haggadah Pesach. It's like, this isn't in Shulchan Aruch, you're telling me? Like, no, it's not Shulchan Aruch. So what do I need it for? Like, well, there's a lot that's not Shulchan Aruch that I was telling you in Hebrew. We saw a month ago, it was a ksiva. The Mishnah Berurah has a list, malachos, actual malachos that are not discussed in Shulchan Aruch. So the Shulchan Aruch is an incomplete book, which is nothing bad about the Shulchan Aruch. Just saying, you have to think differently. Okay? So that's what we're trying to do. So if the material is boring or not of general interest, I'm sorry. To me, it's interesting, and I'm hoping it'll be relevant. So that's how we do it. Yeah, I'm sure we could get. That we could get a ton more viewers if I would say something like, "Bibi has to resign right now," and make that the title of my video. So as clickbait, we'd get 6,000 views. But that's not Torah right now, and it's not in the halacha. So we're not going to discuss that. Well. No, I may have provoked people. It's like, next time vote Lapid. Make that the headline. See what people would say about that. Well, what did you say? Said something I didn't hear it.
No, I just said
it's not very interesting. Yeah. Rabim Sheyut Meimei Pesach Rishon. You had many people who were contaminated with contact with the dead on the first Passover. That's the 14th of Nisan. Imayu Miyud Akal. If they are a minority of the Kahal, So there are a lot of people who are Tamei Mace, but they're not the majority by any stretch. So they're going to be pushed off to Pesach Sheni, like all the other contaminated people. Balkari also pushed off to Pesach Sheni. Tamei Mace, Tzoras, everybody, every 2 months. Tamei Sharetz, everybody. If the majority of the kahal, and we're going to see what is the kahal, were contaminated with contact with the dead, specifically, or the priests, or just the vessels, the service vessels they have in the temple, the cups they use to catch the blood, right? They're all Tmei Meis, or the majority are Tmei Meis. Einon Nidchin. We don't push people off to Erev Pesach, all this majority. Instead, Eliyak Rivu Kulam Pesach Betuma. Everybody, Tahorim and Tameim, those who are ritually pure and those who are contaminated alike. Hatveim Matorim Shnemar Vayi Anoshim. There shouldn't be an aleph over here. There were some people. Right? It says regarding Pesach Sheni, there were some men who were pushed off to Pesach Sheni, right? Which means they were the minority. Yechidim nidchim, ve'enat tzibur nidcha. Okay? Or nidcha. If you say it's present tense, it should be nidcha with the segol. Individuals are pushed off to Pesach Sheni, but not the tzibur. So if the tzibur, which is defined by the majority, are all Tmeim, Mace, so they just do Pesach, Betuma. This exception has to do with everybody's contaminated, specifically with contact with the dead, as we saw much earlier, a few years ago. Which means everybody's a Baal Keri, just go to mikvah already, and then do the service. The problem is, if everybody's a Baal Keri, so then they all go to mikvah, then they're all Tifulei Yom. Still can't do the service. Tifulei Yom cannot go into the Azara. Kind of a problem, right? Yeah. Well,
Even if there's a majority, you can't go to the have a minority do the Torah. I mean, you can do it.
that's the chiddush of the pasuk. Okay. Yeah. No reason to go with not altered. What is this? Hold on a second. Yeah, we need an alter. What's Steinzold say? Yeah.
It says,
Well,
he says here, it says
yeah. Yeah, those who are there.
So,
yeah, so that's the next halacha. So we're going to skip it to understand this. What he means, that who is the kahal? So we're going to see what Yerushalmi says. How you estimate this? You don't take, according to they bring a thing. The Aruch HaShulchan says, I guess you're going to have to do a survey somehow before Pesach. But what Chizkiyahu Melech did when he pushed off Pesach was he realized everybody's not going to be ready on time. He had a good idea. If I'm going to start inviting tribesmen from the north who haven't been to the base of Mikdash in 2 centuries to do this, they're going to need a lot more time to prepare. Okay, so that was an exceptional case. How do you figure out right now, Erev Pesach, we're going to do Pesach Betuma or Betara? How do you figure it out? Here's the answer according to the Rambam. Ketzad Misharina Pesach Leida Imrov Alcohol Tbeino Torim. How do we estimate the 6th halacha? 7:6, chapter 7, halacha 6. Ketzad Misharim. He talks about what you do if it's the third. We skipped all the technical halachas that are of less interest. But you see an illustration over here using stick figures in different colors because it's my book, so I could do that. That's to represent. Notice we also represent the women, as Rav Kapach points out. We've mentioned many times. Okay, women equal men in these calculations, and also the slaves. Even the Canaanite slaves count as people. No three-fifths compromise. Let's say. Okay. Ketzad Misharin. O Misharin Imrov Akal Tmeino Torim. How you know if Rov Akahal, which I've been defining until this point, are impure or contaminated? Ein Misharin B'chol Ochlim. We do not estimate based on how many eaters of Korbon Pesach there are. How you know how many eaters? Well, you have to find every single. I hold that there must be a list. The minuyim are: here's a lamb. Here's the list of people who are supposed to eat of this lamb. Compile all the lists, and you see who's tamei and who's tahor, right? No, you don't calculate how many people are supposed to eat of Korbon Pesach. Shefshar shiu esrim nimim al Pesach chad, mishalchinu to biad achad lishchod alehem. Could be there are 20 people eating this one lamb, but only one person, representative of the group, is going to be sent by them to the temple to slaughter it on their behalf. Right? Every lamb that shows up in the temple has a person with that lamb or that kid goat, but you don't know how many people this is for. So it would be a really difficult time for the people in charge, I guess the Kohanim and Leviim, to start figuring out, are the majority of the Kahal Tamei or Tahor? Instead, Ela Misharim B'Chla Nichnasim Ba'Azara. We estimate based on those who are about to enter the Azara. From where do you enter the Azara? From Harabayas, the outer courtyards. Basically, there are tons of Jews on Harabayas at noon, waiting for Korbon Tamei to be offered, and then be told, okay, we're going to start having Korbon Pesach now. Who's ready? Who's a Tamei Mace? Because, of course, Tamei Mace are allowed on the Temple Mount. Okay, that's not a question. I understand now. It's a Devar Mishnah that Tamei Mace, as long as they don't have other forms of Tumah, they are allowed on the Temple Mount. Correct? And that's the assumption over here, by the way. It's almost a joke to say that Jews should stay off the Temple Mount because they're Tamei Mace. Otherwise, the Leviim could not live. Like the Rambam points out in the Mishnah. What was it? Joseph's remains were in Machane Leviah. The Leviim were allowed to be Tamei Mace and still be in their camp. Right? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Fine. Go die somewhere else. Yes. When everybody's still outside the Azara, or elsewhere on the Temple Mount, right? Before they go into the Azara, that's, by the way, they mentioned the Chel would be the line over here. That's when they start doing the count. Basically, they get on the megaphone, right? Before Korbon Pesach time happens, and they ask, by a show of hands, how many of you are Tahorim? How many of you are Tameim? And if the Tameim win, then the red flag goes up, or whatever it is. I'm using the red flag as that's an example I know from the beach, because the lifeguards have a thing, when the beach is closed, they put up the red flag. Like, you show up at the beach, it's like, no, you can't swim to there, there's jellyfish, or, undertows, or whatever it is. Right? So that's similar. Like, today we're in emergency mode. We're in safe mode. Right? So they start that, and that's how they do it. Basically, you have to calculate. You can't do a census. They're limited to the Jews who are on the Temple Mount getting ready to do Korbon Pesach. That's when the decision is made. If the Rambam said, by the way, that's how you estimate the Kahal. If it's Rov Kohanim, that's much easier. They could get the Kohanim together during, like a break. Let's say before they do Korbon Tamid, they say, and that's what they do in the morning also. Are they going to do the Tamid B'Tara or B'Tumah? So they see which Kohanim are here. Assuming most of the Kohanim are Tahorim, unless something happened, or it's right after the Maccabean Wars or something like that, they'll know pretty quickly if majority of Kohanim are Tameim or not. So too the vessels. The vessels are in their storage room all night long. So you can pretty much assume they remain Tahor unless, I don't know, something got in there that contaminated all of them. Well, what is it? Is that a new hat? Is it new? Oh, so why is he excited about it? Okay.
Wait, is this a way to calculate or
the way? The way to know if the Kahal is Tameim is by...
So nowadays,
you
could set up a fun survey.
Yeah.
You could just say, I'm going to bring my Korbon Pesach. You just go to the Torah.
A Sanhedrin will decide that. Okay. Well, what's the basis for this? The Yerushalmi. And by the way, this is in the memory of Rav Tzuriel. Rav Tzuriel said, come up with mnemonics to remember whatever you do. Okay? He said, see, here's the thing, the chapter and verse number, or the chapter and halacha number, spell out something. Or it's gematria of something, right? So I said, oh yeah, okay, examples. They're like, always remember that. So here, the Yerushalmi Pesachim, Zayin Vav, corresponds to Hilchos Korbon Pesach of the Rambam, Zayin Vav. Okay, they're both Zayin Vav. What does Yerushalmi say? I'm trying to tell you, remember that. You find this halacha in Zayin Vav. So, Rabbi Imi b'shem Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. That's Reish Lakish. L'horaya hilchu achar yeshivat Eretz Yisrael. When it comes to saying horayos, horayot, horayos, how you say in Yiddish, whatever it might be. the Masechta talks about, but the Korbon, the Bar-Hayim Davar, the Sanhedrin ruled wrongly. It got everybody involved in this Karis, right? How do you know if Rove of Am Yisrael violated this prohibition? How you calculate it? Rove Yeshivas Eretz Yisrael. So it means you actually have to do a census of all the Jews. If most of the Jews in Eretz Yisrael did this Avera, that's when you have a Bar-Hayim Davar case. L'tuma, if you need to know if you're doing the Korbon Pesach B'tuma or not, or the Korbanos B'tuma, Hilchu Achar Rov Nichnasim La'azara. If it's regards to Tuma of Pesach, follow Rov Nichnasim La'azara. Not the people in Eretz Yisrael, not the people in Jerusalem, the people who are about to enter the Azara. That's how you do it. It's an explicit Rishami. And then the Gemara continues. Ma b'chol v'chat v'sharin, o ein misharin el kat rishon bilvad. You know there's 5 groups, right? There's supposed to be 3 groups. 3 groups. What does the Rambam say at the beginning? It's right there on the first parak. Yeah, so what does the Rambam say how you do that? What's the minimum people? We'll just review. You need 50 people, right? So the Rambam says it. There's a thing, we call it Dot Yisrael. Where did I put it? I made a note of it so we could talk about it here. Where did I put it? Okay, here, it says here. So it says you need 30 people, right? You're basically 3 groups of 30, and then he says the 50, right? So if you don't have 50 people, by the way, you can't do Pesach the Chapila. Okay? Shachatu, okay. Last year we barely had 50 people. It was pretty bad. We need 50 Pesachs. This guy was arguing with the rabbi over here. He assumed everybody who goes to Yazara needs to bring a Korbon Pesach with him. So you need 50 Korbon Pesachs. 50 men or 50 representatives with 50 Korbon Pesachs in order to count. That way you can divide them at least first 30, 10 go out, then bring another 10, 10 go out, then bring another 10, so that you could be Yotze with these 50, 3 groups of 30. That's the minimum. I was under the assumption, the way it is, Nichnasim Lazara, just like you can't have no way to limit Jews going into the Temple Mount, because there's no such thing as Jews not being allowed on the Temple Mount. So too, like it says in Yoma, Kohen Gadol would show up on the morning of the holiday, and the Azara is packed. Wait, are all those Jews there? The only person, you don't even need Kohanim in the Azara on Yom Kippur, right? Everything, the Kohen Gadol is doing everything. Oh yeah, he has a few assistants. He actually does have a few assistants. Hold this for me. It's like that. One who completes the Shechita for the Kohen Gadol. Kohen Gadol is doing a one-man show on Yom Kippur, yet the Azara is packed, not just with Kohanim and Leviim, Jews, regular Jews. Oh, they have no business being there. No, you don't understand. The Gemara in many places, and the Mishnah also, assumes that on holidays, there were just lots of people. And they talk about the case, what if, because of the crush, people were actually in the Kodesh, bumping up against the menorah? How could you allow such a thing? The answer was, it was a crowd. They didn't stop the Jews. So I assume that the people were there. So
even if
what?
There were certain people bringing Korbon Pesach, people who weren't bringing.
No, people who were intended to be there. If you get karis, if you were at the Azara, the Zman Shmitas Korbon Pesach, and you're not participating in the eating Korbon Pesach tonight, one of these animals is not for you.
No, yeah. Somebody already brought his Korbon.
Yeah.
But he had a shulech that brought him, let's say, 1 p.m.
Yeah.
He decides he wants to destroy the bacon the justice.
Yes.
3 p.m.
Yes.
He just shows up.
Yes.
And it ends up being that there's so many people who takes his spot, someone who could have been.
No, so they would give precedence to people who want to actually have animals. If it says they not lock the doors, they need 3 groups. But as long as people could get in there, they would allow them in. If in Achinami, I don't know. When they say there was a miracle in the temple, what was the miracle? Yeah. Now wait a second. It was always, they didn't say it was they'd be standing tzufim, and then when it came time to bow, they would all have room to bow. When were they standing tzufim? In Yom Kippur? All the holidays. Okay? They're all bowing, yeah, but especially Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur will show you this. There's no, you could say Yom Kippur, why were all those Jews there, packed it in on Yom Kippur, getting ready to bow down when they hear God's name, right? Why are they all packed in there? What avodah are they doing? What korban could they bring on Yom Kippur? There's no korbanos except that which the Kohen Gadol himself brings, right? Absolutely no other korban is offered that day. There's no the dharma and the doubles and other things, right? They want to see. Yes, they want to be close to God. By the way, this is a Jewish privilege. I wouldn't call this a right. This is God's special privilege for the Jewish people, that they can go into his house and be there and daven. That's what David HaMelech was wishing for. You could daven. Chazal said, you need a rule, you need Jewish representatives, the Anshe Ma'amad, who are there to participate in the offering of the Korbonot Tzibur. Minimum. And I would imagine if it was rainy and cold, maybe it would be less popular days. But on regular days, there would be lots of Jews knowing about the temple courtyard, just davening and things. And especially the Temple Mount, the outer courts. That was just Jews. Lama Dover Doman, you see this. Just like the Kotel Plaza today is always attended by Jews. Right? There are tons of people are there all the time. And there's some people who they're 24/7. There's some people who daven at the Kotel every davening. There's some people who go to the Kotel every day. Some people go to the Kotel every week, every month, whatever it is. So too, this is a religious inclination that people have towards the Beis Hamikdash. Once people get over this whole Kotel as a replacement, Rav Ben Nevad idea, the Kotel is a replacement for the temple, and the temple is up and running, you will have the same phenomenon. You will have Jews who will be there all the time. Okay? And there'll actually be a Toelis. That'll produce, Talmid Chachamim and Nevi'im and people like that from that connection. That's what David HaMelech aspired to. Yeah. That was what he wanted. Achas shalti meis Hashem osa avakesh shivti beveis Hashem kol yemei chayai lachazos lavachem vakir behechalo. None of this talks about sacrifice. Ki yitz peneni b'suko, right? Yom Ra. God will yitz peneni is like God will hide me. Take refuge there. Just run away. Just be in the Beis Hamikdash all the time. That could be a big milah. Just like what's the highest a person can achieve? You just meditate and daven all day, right? Rabbi Yochanan, the Rambam, where's the best place to do that? Yeah, so there you go. Of course, they'll close the Azara at night, so you have to be outside the Azaras at night. But there's nothing preventing Jews from being on the Temple Mount even in the middle of the night. Okay, the Quantum of just keep them out of the Azara and the restricted areas. Okay, so what was I saying here? So the point is, it's called Nechnasim. Basically, its Jews are there, ready for Korbon Pesach, and they ask a show of hands. The Gemara here is asking, do we do the count before the first group goes in, or everybody's there? Amar Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Boon, Ad Shehem Bibachutz Heim Misharit Atzman. It means that it's actually the responsibility of the people. Everybody are outside. Okay, they all show up extra early for Korbon Pesach. They all will be the Atzlanim. The earliest time to get off for Korbon Pesach, we said basically 2:30 in the afternoon or so. Right? So that's when there's a whole big count. Everybody show of hands, like a minyan. There's not one guy in charge of saying, are we a minyan? Who's davening? Right? People there, they figured it out. Are we Tmeim or not? And then they go ahead with it. And then there's an official notification. This Pesach is being done B'tumah. So there you have it. It's kind of surprising. But of course, Rav Kapach says the women aren't counted in this case. Women go into the Azara just like the men. There's no mechitza. The chiddush is that when it's not time for temple service, when there's a nighttime activity, the Simchas Pesach Shueva, that's when there's a mechitza. And by that I mean a physical mechitza. There's women upstairs, men downstairs. But when there's an avoda to do, there is no divider. And also you bring the kids, the same thing. The hakel is men, women, and children. It's family style. Okay? Also in Yom Kippur, we never saw ever that there's a limit to women entering the courtyard of the temple on Yom Kippur. Yeah. Yeah, that's a very late thing. It's not a halachic thing. Mechitza and Beis Knesses, a lot of times it didn't exist. And we said that before. In places where women did go to synagogue, they had no reason. And then when the women showed up to every now and then to the synagogue, they either sat in the back row, right at the door, or right outside the door, right outside the windows. And then they started building. When women started going to synagogue, well, yes, what's the question?
In this halacha, Rambam says you can have up to 20 people for one korban.
What did you say? Yeah, we have up to 20 people.
Yes, so
20 people are eating this.
When Agrippas does his count of the Jewish people...
It was a lot more.
No, it says that there can only be up to 10 people for one korban.
Really?
Yes.
Up to 10?
Yes.
Like, limit of 10? I don't think so. Really? It says limit of 10 or at least 10?
It says up to 10. It says
That's using Lashon Guzma because Agrippus had the Kohen Gadol. Agrippus the second had the Kohen Gadol count. Sorry, this would be Agrippus the first, I think. I don't know which Agrippus was it. Either way, he had them count. They tried to say that there was at least 10 on them, you know. But they got to an astronomical amount there, right? How many kidneys did they have from the Korbon Pesach there? What's the exact number in Pesachim? I think maybe there's a machlokas.
600,000 or something.
Yes, there was 600,000 like who left Mitzrayim, and he says there's 10 people on each one. That's a minimum. Even if you just say it's just 10, then you get 6 million people participating in Korbon Pesach.
No, it
But the
says
Rambam's saying,
Lo nimnu alav yoter me'asara bnei adam.
really, okay, so that's a limit then. Now it's still a ton of people. The point is, I guess the Pesach Reuben, you could say then that they're pointing out there were so many Korbanos Pesach around. All you needed was 10 people per Pesach. I don't know. Whatever the number works out, the point is we got to quite a few million people participating in Korban Pesach, which is tested to by the Romans also. The Rambam's, I guess, talking more of a regular case. You know, a lamb could provide. I bought myself a section of lamb for the 7th day of Pesach, something frozen. It looks like there's quite a few kazaisim on there. And on Sunday afternoon, by the way, we're going to the shepherd right before Shmuel. You want to hear this? You're invited to come with us on Sunday afternoon before Shkia, the same place where we're going to see the moon, just like a few meters down the hill, but still where you can still see the moon. There's the shepherd, the guy who sits over here, and we've arranged to go visit the lamb that he's intending to use for Korban Pesach. We have the Nuyim on it, okay, and we're going to go visit the lamb and take pictures with it. Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening, on the 1st of Nisan. So you're welcome to join us. Go visit the lamb and help check it for Moomin. Yes, we're actually doing this. Yes, you have to make sure. No, it's pretty easy. It's a pretty decent lamb. Moomin are pretty easy to catch. You know, it doesn't. You know, so yeah, you coming? We're very excited about this. Okay, fine, but it's very excited to be able to check the lamb so far in advance of Korbon Pesach. What? What? Yeah, Yatir. That's to make sure the moon it's an actual moon, to certify the moon. To make sure something doesn't have moomin is actually pretty easy. Like you see, there's nothing wrong with it. You know? Okay, there's a list in the Rambam. Yeah, moomin stick out. Okay, make sure the ears and the lips are okay and everything like that. Check the eyes. You know, most lambs are pretty much moon free unless they get hurt by something. You know, okay? Lambs don't really get into fights with each other. They don't have horns and stuff. They're not bumping each other. Yeah. Let's see. Okay, so my question was, I don't think Am Yisrael is prepared for this reality that the Kohen Gadol is going to do an avoda on Yom Kippur, and there are going to be men and women standing around the Azara. Mostly, I would imagine that just because of our sensibilities, people will separate. You know, you're gonna have like men on this side, women on that side, but they're not going to build them a pizza in the. Was I disconnected just now from Riverside? You went blank for a minute. They're not going to be putting up mechitzas in the Azara. That's a no-no. They're not going to build other structures. They're not going to put anything of wood in the Azara. Okay, the Bima Shel Eitz they put in the Ezras Nashim. Okay, their men and women are probably going to stick to their sides in the Azara on Yom Kippur or on Passover, whatever it may be. But even then, there's going to be a little bit of mixing. Okay, just like you see when you have a funeral, like out here, or at the Beis HaSpedim, Har Menuchos. Even at Haredi places, you see that there's not a strict mechitza between where the men and women are, right? When it's a solemn occasion, Jews don't need to be told these types of things, like have such a strict divider. Hasidim have such a thing, but that never was the idea. And Rav Moshe Feinstein points out, there were Hasidim who started this idea that even at family pseudos mitzvah, you have to have a separation, Shabbos table separation, and the Litvish were very much opposed to that because it's explicit in the Mishnayos that the Menuyim, usually relate to each other, all eat together, men and women alike. The Kal is a little bit shy about what she's doing. She was just married a week ago, but she's there, right? And you're not allowed to actually build a mechitza or separate the people who are eating Korban Pesach together. They're one family group. They're now eating together. You can't say, oh, women in this room or women behind the mechitza. That creates an issue. Yeah, so the women on that side of the table, they could, but still there's someone at the line, or a couple sitting next to each other, man sits next to his wife. That's a perfectly normal thing that you will see in the Beis Hamikdash, especially at Hakel. When Hakel happens, people will be standing around in family groups, okay? And they're not going to put up a mechitza, Chas v'shalom, in the Beis Hamikdash saying men to this side, women to that side, and break up groups. Why? Because, as May pointed out, when you're in the temple, you don't need this type of shmira. Okay? It's already, the gravity is enough that people know not to fraternize. Okay, let's see the next halacha, then we'll finish here. Pesach shekru b'tumah reizin echal ketahor. This is the 8th halacha. If they brought Korbon Pesach b'tumah, so it's eaten as though it was pure. Shebetilato lo ba el achila, because from the outset it was only brought to be eaten. Other korbanos are not brought necessarily to be eaten, even though there is a din that they should be eaten, like chatas. Chatas brought b'tumah is not eaten by the kohanim. They don't nechal l'chol tamei, but it's not eaten by every tamei. Elo tmeimes shenidchat lahen atumah azot ulchayotzi bahen mitamei maga tumot. The only people eating were people actually tmeimes, or similar types of tumot. Who? Aval tmein sha tumah yotza lehem igufan gon zavim nidot nodot mitzorain lo yichlu mimenu yimlachu p'turin. These people whose tumah comes from things that have in their body, the zavim, the nidos, the yoldos, the tzorin, the balkari, right? All these people can't eat the Korban Pesach, the Chadchila. They'll be putter if they eat a Pesach Betuma in such a case, because it is Betuma. So there's an example here. So who's the type of person who's tummy because he touched like a Tmei mace? Well, Tumas Sheretz. Midoraisa. Okay? According to tradition, only a Korban Pesach that's being eaten by pure people, because it's brought Betuma, are those who are Tmeim going to be hit with the penalty for doing so. If the Korban Pesach is being eaten by Tmeim anyways, by Tmei mace, for example, then no one can be hit with a Isser Kares for having eaten this Betuma. Okay? Yeah. Even if Tmei mace ate from the emurim are the parts that are supposed to burn on this Mizbeach, the Tmei mace will be exempt. Okay? So that's kind of interesting. Another condition that you can bring Pesach B'tumah is when the tzibur were contaminated before the blood was thrown. It means after shchita, because we saw the Rambam earlier at halachas, there's actually a nafkamina. What if the person got contaminated before the shchita? What if he got contaminated after the zrika? And what about in between? There's a takana de rabbanon there. And also I color-coded it. You can see that it's like in the 3rd chapter. If the Korban Pesach's blood was applied to the altar, B'tara, and then the tzibur became entirely Tmeim or majority Tmeim, the Korban Pesach cannot be eaten by them. Yeah. Wow. That's it. It's talking about the tzibur. I guess no one will eat Korban Pesach. They sprinkled all the blood of the Korban Pesach properly. They have all these Pesachim ready to eat, and somehow the rove tzibur became Tmei mace or Tmeim somehow, right? So this is Achar Zrikas Adam. Now you can't eat the Korban Pesach. Now it's kind of wild also. Yep, these halachas are there. Yeah, those who got tummy from touching something else. So if the tumah if they're the source of the tumah themselves, so they're like Tmei mace. Sorry, they're not like Tmei mace. Okay? So who's like a Tmei mace? A person who touched something and became tummy, like a sheretz. Balkari, Balkari is the type of the tumah comes out of his own body.
But why would they call the second one?
I know, no. You're looking at the means of purification. The Rambam in this halach is looking at the means of contamination. The Rambam says tamei mace, and other people who became tamei from touching something else or contact with something else. Whereas there are those who are tameim because something came out of their body. And the Balkari is tamei because of something that came out of his body. Shechva zera avni avos atuma tamei adam v'chelim magam v'chikeres ba'avir v'yin tamei ba tamei gadol b'shas magam v'echad nogea ba oro oso mibsaro. Zeri shom tuma din Torah. See, echad nogea ba ohoro oso mibsaro. One who touches it or one who admits it. You understand? So usually the one who touches it is the woman. Okay? So, and that's why the chamashir the nogea becha adasha to touch it, adasha lentil size amount. The roeh, one who sees it, that means the one who admits it. EMIT, the chol shehu. Okay. V'ena roeh tamei ad shetetzi menu v'yechatein pi amash. Nemar asher tetzei mimenu shechvat zera. Because pasuk says one who from whom the zera comes out. The nemar oach timusu afila chafilu ra b'kisam ho v'gial lefi ama nitma. Okay. You know, saw it just on a toothpick or something. Okay? So, yeah, just saying I was showing someone else. The Rambam says it has to be emitted under like normal circumstances. He has to feel it. It means he has to have a normal ejaculation through an erection and things like that. Sorry to say it in pleasant company. So, he talks about different ways over here. So the way I understood it, I think that's the way the Rambam understands it also. See, I understand it. Like, I got it from the Rambam. Is a person the emitter is different than the person just contact. Okay, so roed tumas keri is tuma that came from his goof and not just contact with it. Okay, contact with something else that's a third person. Okay, but the woman who touches zera should be tmeya, but there's an exception. Now, I'm talking about if like she touched with her finger or something, right? However, here's the halacha: echad ish ve'echad isha sheshimshu mitasan, man or woman, right, who engaged in this act, shtam tmeim. They're both tamei. Ushtam rishon l'tuma din Torah. They're both rishon l'tuma, like the Balkari himself. Din Torah. Ve'ena isha tmeim mishum nogat v'shich zera. But she is not tamei because she touched shich zera. I was saying so she's a toucher. He's tamei because he emits. She's tamei because she touches. Shenegias beis astarim ena negia. Negias beis astarim, internal contact, is not considered negia. So remember that one. If by the way some of it comes out, yeah, then she has problem. Ela mishameshes, the one who engaged in relations, harehi karoa keri. She's like someone who saw keri, just like the man. The man is not someone who touched keri. The man is someone who saw keri. Vinay shetia the who shetia bat shalushlim b'yom echad, minimum age. Okay, so I was correcting this thing. There is that distinction. A man is not tummy for touching keri. Okay, it's shikla sarah. He's tummy because he admitted it, but so too is the woman in the same boat. By the way, sometimes, a lot of times, it doesn't happen. Then afterwards, a woman does come into contact, anyways, not just through the basis of stalling. Right? So, that's between, that's a little bit more personal we can get into in this venue. So, I'm even Yavin. Now we'll go back to our regularly scheduled programming. Be well.